Okay, hi. Welcome to the future of healthcare, creating VR and AR for patients and doctors. Today's panel will feature some emerging thought leaders in creating healthcare applications for AR and VR. Just by a show of hands, how many people already work in doing creating healthcare applications? Anyone? Oh wow, quite a few. Great, that's awesome. We just wanted to give you a brief introduction of the topic. So here's the agenda, why we're here, and just run through this stuff. Because we think, some people who aren't familiar, like all of you who didn't raise your hands, we wanted to run through some things, some examples. So, we're here today because we think that there are huge opportunities for healthcare applications in VR and AR, of course. There is emerging research using VR and AR in diagnostic and therapeutic applications in patients. But another important aspect in healthcare we think is the storytelling aspect, where VR can help inspire empathy and understanding of various disease states among physicians and others. So, but often when we think of medical and healthcare games, we might think of something like this, or even, stuff like this. So, but what if we took it a few steps further? So, all kidding aside, really, we do think that there are huge opportunities for healthcare applications in VR and AR. As VR and AR technologies become more prevalent, we think there's plenty of room to innovate in the healthcare space. So the speakers on this panel will discuss some of the needs, the challenges, the opportunities, and the process for creating VR and AR in healthcare by sharing their own work and experiences. And with that, we'll launch into introductions. My name is Tracey John. I'm on the advisory board for VRDC, particularly for healthcare. My career spanned video game journalism. Sorry, I forgot to show some examples. These are examples in healthcare, allowing children with disabilities to create, rehabilitation for amputees, and veterans with PSD. So sorry, I skipped some slides. And my career spanned game journalism, but as well as mobile development, most recently creating interactive experiences for gaming applications in healthcare advertising. And most recently, I am now at Minds and Assembly, where we specialize in creating digital healthcare applications. And a project that I'm currently working on that I hope to share with you someday is a VR project for children who have cognitive disabilities. So that's me. Next we go to...
Hi. This is on? Yeah. My name is Bart Kok. I'm a studio manager of a virtual reality studio, the Virtual Dutchman, which is located in Holland. And I got my background, I got my bachelor degree from Saxion Hogeschool Enschede. That is, what's it called? University of Applied Sciences in English for you guys. And I got specialized in 3D game concepting and interaction design. And nowadays I'm doing a lot of consulting and creating ideas based off our clients' needs. There are a couple of healthcare clients, but generally we do a lot of things in the VR space. And I also have a particular strong opinion where this whole VR is going to be in the next couple of years. So that's about me.
And also we wanted to quickly show the Parkinson's VR experience, which is actually how Bart and I sort of met. We saw this going around on YouTube, and it's a really cool experience. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about it. Well,
yeah, the thing is, we were contacted by AbbVie, a large pharmaceutical company, and they wanted to show people who don't have Parkinson's disease how it would be. And with the application we created, people could, do something that you would normally do, like without even thinking, like doing your groceries, and then experience the kind of problems people with Parkinson's disease encounter during such a normal acquire. But we might elaborate on that during the questions.
Yes, yeah, we'll elaborate more during the panel. So, and next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gerald Flannery, and I'm a creative director at Havas Life, New York. Part of the Havas network, and we specialize in healthcare advertising. So we basically do everything from not all those commercials are always cheesy, the pharma commercials, but stuff like that, to the actual materials and things that speak to both HCPs, healthcare providers, and consumers as well. My experience is I've been in this industry for a little over 15 years now. I'm an avid gamer and I love technology, and I believe that my love and passion for that, and working in the healthcare space, I see how it's just one-to-one. Like, there's so many opportunities to push the technology in the healthcare space to create that empathy and to educate and stuff. And what you see on here is just not necessarily VR, AR, but this was a project I did for the American Heart Association, and it just needed to do the simple task of teaching people. This was, first of all, presented an experience at a Heart Association conference that had about 800 people that attended, and the goal was to teach these 800 people the simple aspects of CPR, which is 100 beats per minute, and pumping someone's chest at 100 beats per minute. So I figured the simplest way to get people to understand that was do a rhythm-based game, but not only that, it was a game that the whole entire audience can engage in at the same time. So basically everyone's phone, by going to a website, their phone becomes a controller, and then they would just basically tap to the rhythm of the music and fill the 4 chambers of a heart. Once they fill that heart, you would save a life, which would then populate the dance floor, which you see in the background. So that big screen with the heart was like the screen projected in the dinner, and then everyone on their phone were playing in sync. So everyone played together and was saving a life, and collectively, the group saved about 7,000 lives and stuff. So it was really, nice and engaging way to teach people CPR and have them all engaged at the same time. Mark?
Yeah, Mark Lightowler. I run a company called Phorix. I've recently just left Novartis after 15 years, so a pharmaceutical company. I've spent quite a lot of time making molecules. I'm a research chemist by training. But at Phorix, I've spent time now trying to take technology and working how you can use things like VR and AR, maybe as treatment itself, but certainly there's a high probability that we can use AR and VR to augment treatment and to get more out of it, which many of you are probably doing. Part of it's through gaming, but of course content here becomes the really big thing. So understanding how people with diseases live and work, and their narrative and the story, and helping bring that to life as an experience are some of the real opportunities, I think, for healthcare in the future. I got into the virtual reality space with Oculus Rift, trying to do what most people, I think, have done in pharma first, which is the educational space. So I worked in respiratory. I was the head of digital, worldwide head of digital for respiratory. We were launching a new drug, and we decided to try and show physicians at big conferences how it would look like to fly down people's bronchi. Maybe you can play it whilst I'm going. So you can fly through an inhaler and fly through bronchi. So this is a pretty simple version of virtual reality. But to be honest, it's one of the first times that physicians were able to sit, see, experience, turn around. At this stage couldn't interact because this was 2013, 2014. So I think we were one of the first or second guys doing anything in healthcare in virtual reality. And then actually people could actually be inside a cell. So explaining extremely complicated things to physicians is one thing. I think we've managed to do that, and I think as we get into the talk, there are other things that we can do with virtual reality. Of course, explaining very complicated things to patients about what's going on is another big thing, and I think virtual reality can help there.
Awesome. Thank you. So, we can get started with the moderated Q&A. So I guess each of you talk about how you got into creating VR and AR in healthcare in the first place.
Well, for us, it was like, something we weren't accustomed to do. We were and are a 3D visualization studio for over 20 years now. And as soon as the Kickstarter came up, we jumped into the depths of this new VR scene, got ourselves 6 units from Kickstarter, started to do a lot of things. Eventually we were contacted by a few academic hospitals, talked with a lot of experts there. And after that, finally, we were found by a pharmaceutical company called AbbVie. First, they wanted to show something really simple. That was during the DevKit 1 days from Oculus. So they were holding a presentation for, I don't know the English term, but for people who sedate you before an operation. Like the people...
Sedated.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
well, those guys.
Anesthesiologist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they really wanted
Anesthesiologist?
to let them experience what it is if you go in such a place, because normally they just walk in, do their thing, they walk away, and they wanted to show them the, what happens to the patients. That you get there, a lot of people get around you, you get sedated, yeah, your vision gets blurred out if you're going fully under sedated. And that was like, really compelling. And of course they were showing off this experience in their own office. And then finally we got this new assignment for the Parkinson's disease, and then things started all over again. That was during the DK2 days, so was still not little interaction, but the things we came up with for this experience was really well. Don't know if I'm about to elaborate on that right now, but the things we tried there, the core message of the application was to get people to feel the awkward sensation of things happening that you don't control of. So for instance, right at the beginning with the DK1 and still DK2, a lot of people haven't tried VR out yet. And the first thing people think when they put on a headset is, oh, I look silly. Yeah. And we wanted to make that feeling even stronger, because those are the feelings, the unpleasant feelings you can create in VR without, make people nauseated. So, for instance, one part in the experience, you're doing your groceries in the supermarket, and when you talk about Parkinson's disease, usually the one thing that people come up with is, oh, you got shaking hands. But actually, there are a lot more things that come into play. And for instance, one of the things you can endure is like a freeze. Your body just stops, but you're fully aware you're freezing, but you can't do anything. So we let people just, freeze in the middle of an aisle in the supermarket, and we had this mocap animation of a fellow grocery shopper person would then come into your path and starts asking, okay, could you please move away, or can I pass? And then instead of just looking at that, we implemented a few games which you could control by looking around, because we didn't have any motion controllers. So that not only were you standing on this busy floor with a headset on, but you had to do like silly games, moving your head. So people were fully aware of this, and we're like, oh, this is annoying. And then at the same time, the actual VR shopper was like shouting at you, like really nasty stuff, and it got all sorts of emotions, like get out of the way, you freak! Why are you standing still? Why don't you move? And it's just to create this empathy of the things that could happen during such a normal choir. And imagine that happening to a person, because it's not only about the VR experience in this case. Afterwards, you can talk to the people who did the VR experience, and then you can talk to them and say, okay, imagine you're walking on an intersection on a crossroad. You get that same feeling. Now you know how that's going to be when the cars start lining up. So that was for us a really interesting way to portray this disease to someone to get them inside of their shoes.
The question was, how did you get into VR and AR in the first place?
Well, I mean, for me, it was, I've always had like a passion for this stuff. The thing was convincing the client that this was right for them, and for me, it was always going to the client with a solid case as to why they need to use AR or VR to enhance or create an experience that's sticky, something that people actually walk away from and they'll remember because they went through this experience. They'll have a strong takeaway. So, getting into it I really can't tell you like a time when I got into it, but I can tell you, numerous times when, again, stating that case and then presenting that to the client and then having to, sell them in on why we need to do that and do this, use this technology. And then stating that case, it's as simple as doing the research, and looking at the technology. Like he pointed out, VR makes perfect sense for Parkinson because you want people to experience, you look silly, and that's how people suffer from Parkinson's, that's how they look. So it just made sense to do that. In my case, and unfortunately I can't show anything because I'm currently working on it, but I work in the atopic dermatitis space, and that's severe skin eczema. So when people, they break out with would look like hives and stuff, and it gets really severe and embarrassing. So some people, they don't go outside, or they don't want people to see them because you can have these random flare-ups. 1 minute they're normal and the next they're just breaking out. So So you can imagine with that, okay, you know, it's a surface disease, so it would make sense to do something with AR, and that way you can actually have people see what they look like with this atopic dermatitis. So that's the kind of the space that we're playing in, and it just made perfect sense. So again, going to the client and presenting this to them is just like, you know, this technology is right for this because it allows the users to experience, you know, what people who suffer from AD suffer from. You're looking in the mirror, and then all of a sudden you have AD. So then you create that kind of one-to-one experience, and then we educate them on the issue, like how the source of AD, what really stems to causing AD, because it's not just a surface issue. So that's what the challenge that we have at hand is to first educate you know, HCPs, healthcare providers, doctors on atopic dermatitis, but also let them know it's not just a surface issue. It's something that actually stems from within. But we hook them by starting with the surface, something they're used to seeing. And how do you hook them? What if we was to apply AD to them? Or what if they can see it happen in real time? So those are the type of things that we're experimenting in. And, you know, just to your point about actually getting into this stuff, I think it was always there. It was just finding that right moment when to present and make a state for that technology. Case for it.
Yeah. And Mark, you mentioned, you know, getting into it through the Ultibro MOA experience, but I guess how did that come about at Novartis?
Yeah, I mean, trying to find different experiences and trying to find different things, especially to communicate science to prospective physicians, is always a challenge. There's always different channels, different marketing that you want to get to. And then we came across, at the agency that we were doing most of our work with, we came across, okay, so here's an experimental Oculus developer's kit, and it kind of made sense. And it kind of made sense for quite a few reasons, because suddenly you were able to tell a story in a different way. We'd made lots of MOA, mode of action videos before, like many brands, but they don't have enough engagement. You can watch it, you watch it passively, you walk away, you could forget it. And part of it's the experience, and part of it's the newness of the medium and VR, but the other part is being able to craft a different story in a different way. And I think that was the beauty for me as a kind of a healthcare storyteller rather than a gamer or the other medias. As a healthcare storyteller, you're always trying to find that way where you can use a different medium and you can craft a story to build and make science memorable. And that's what everyone's trying to do, trying to make their science memorable. If we'd had, and we wanted it a long time before I think the technology was available to do some more of the other pieces, like we wanted to bring for COPD patients, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, like if you smoke too much, it's a bit like asthma. So people are breathless, they can't breathe, they get heavy, they get sedentary, they stay indoors, they don't go out, they kind of retreat, cocoon themselves a little bit. And one of the problems is societal, because you want to be able to bring the outside in, because they can't get out in many ways, because they just can't move. And part of it's psychological, and then you start to think, okay, something like VR really starts to work, because if I can just give them some enablers to see some of the outside without the risk of going outside, maybe I can help them move and eventually get them outside. So part is long-term behavioral change, but it wasn't right then, and I think we could do that kind of thing now, but this was too early, 2011, 2012. But then the mode of action is a great way to start. It's pretty controllable, but I think there's now such a range of different things that, you know, outside of Novartis and what we're looking at more in terms of therapy or augmenting pharmacotherapy with virtual reality or AR. I think there's a great potential for that.
Yeah, and this kind of leads into my next question. Obviously, it seems that we, you know, as developers, at least right now in the healthcare space, need to work with pharmaceutical companies to sort of fund these projects and also, you know, get the science out there to even do these projects. But at the same time, I know that on the agency side, like Gerald alluded to, it's difficult to get clients to sort of buy into it. Bart mentioned, you know, even users at conventions kind of feel silly using it. You know, Mark, you were at Novartis, and I'm sure there was some people to convince to sort of make one of the first Oculus Rift experiences for Ultibro. So I guess my question to all of you is like, how do you face these challenges when it's not even like the technology is here and we want to create healthcare applications that make a difference, but how do we convince people who aren't familiar with the technology that need to be convinced to do this?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, you need a brave client, which I know is often a challenge. You need someone that can see that they can do something different. And part of it, I think, is to not focus on the technology. It's to focus on the end use. The technology could be anything, but what you're doing is giving them a different way to engage with their client base. And that's what was sold to me. Was not the, hey, this is super cool, we've got to do something with it. It was more what you just told me, what you wanted to craft for your brand, we could do through this medium. And it was different. I mean, okay, I like the technology, but then selling it on through to the rest of the company, I have to admit I didn't tell that many people until we built it, but that's the power of being the client at that stage, and you have your budget and you do what you do. But we built it up a little bit internally about what to expect. And more importantly, we brought the demo projects in and we installed them in the company space so that people could see it, they could play with it, they could touch it, they could feel it, and they got past the silliness. And we had 20,000 doctors go through the first conference, and they hadn't seen it before. It wasn't available. It's really kind of secret stuff, and none of them felt silly. We had them sit down. We didn't. We controlled a lot of their space for them, so we didn't end up with anything untoward happening with that kind of motion sickness stuff. And I think as we've learned, we could do different things with them. We did have them standing up at the end. We controlled their space in different ways. But I think you have to take it step by step, but you do need a brave client. But I would say don't focus on the technology, focus on the content that it creates.
And I mean, and to your point, and I wholeheartedly agree with not focusing on the technology, but sometimes you always get that, one where, a lot of in my experience, a lot of their perception, like when you do present like VR or AR and stuff, the first thing a lot of them go through is movies and films and science fiction. So that's their perception of the technology that you presented to them. So they're expecting it to work just like they see in the movies and stuff. And the minute it doesn't, that's when the hesitation starts to come. So at least in my experience, a lot of when it comes to like presenting the AR or the VR technology, what I try to do beforehand is, one, I find examples, but two, I try to take into consideration, I definitely take into consideration how we want to use this and the scenarios that we want to use it, and try to think of a lot of solutions beforehand before going to the client, so that way I can be prepared just in case they bring up, what if there's a lot of people walking here? How's it going to detect this? Or, if we use like motion sensors or anything, and there's a lot of questions that they may pop up on the fly, and then you have to be ready to answer that, because then that helps to Mark's point about the story, selling them on the story is the biggest part of it. But you always have to account too for the technology aspect of it, and the fact that their imaginations tend to run wild and they just think of it like what they see on film and TV. So like perfect, just like the holodeck, I'm in this world, and then the resolution is like real life, and so you got to kind of talk them down from that. But then having your back pocket what you're proposing and why you believe it's going to work, and some examples that can help speak to that. I mean, you definitely don't want to show them the janky experiences, because they'll remember that more so than anything. I don't care how great the story is or how good the idea, they'll remember the fact that it looked broken and it didn't work, and then that just kills your idea, and it's even a harder uphill battle from there.
And I know Bart, AbbVie came to you guys though to create the Parkinson's experience, but did you run into any resistance on the client side, even
no, FE did their own research, and they came to us and they had an idea. But we also had some other clients in the pharmaceutical area, and usually, it's a department for, what do you say? yeah, they need something for an event or something like that. They heard the thing about VR, and just like Gerald mentioned, oh, this VR, we have to have this. And they already have these crazy ideas everywhere. It's really obnoxious. So most of the time, and this is for all different kinds of clients as well, what we do is, first, I'm all over the place, so I give a small presentation on site. No hassle for them. I take down the equipment. I give them a really short demo, but not also the guys I'll be working with, but also the guys who are like, got like the hand on the money. And I just show them a really high-end VR experience. It doesn't even have to be something we made. I just want to give them a good VR impression. Yeah. This is good VR. This is totally awesome. Most of the time, it's totally unrelated to the subject. Then they probably have some questions already. This whole unicorn thing I wanted to do. I now get that's not really the case. Okay, that's good. I don't need to talk into that. And then I give a small, brief session, but a really small session of, okay, well, what do you guys want to do? Well, what's the product, or what's the problem, or mainly what's like the whole goal of the experience. But I believe VR is just a platform, like you guys mentioned. It's not about a technology. I mean, when internet was new, it was about, oh, are you dialing up? Do you have a broadway internet or whatever? You don't care nowadays. You use your email, whatever. If you got internet, you use it on your phone, maybe on your desk. And I think VR is going to be like that. It's not going to be about mobile VR, this VR. It's going to be good VR in a couple of years on all platforms, or mostly good. And then you're going to communicate through VR. So now in this area, especially when DK2 and DK1 were around, I tried to show them a good experience as possible, answer a few questions, try to get the core message out of their problem, and then just reschedule a meeting 2 weeks later. So just let it, sink down a bit. And then I know this, this meeting is going to be much more productive. Everybody's got this, eyes on the same road, and that's helping out a lot.
Absolutely.
And aside from sort of client and even technological obstacles, I think when we create healthcare applications, especially if we're working with pharmaceutical clients, we actually have to do a lot of stuff dealing with regulations, such as the FDA in the US or the EMA in Europe. Can you guys talk about those kind of challenges, and if you're developing in healthcare, like what you can expect when dealing with these kind of regulatory bodies?
Yeah, I can kick off. It's quite obnoxious. I mean, sorry if there are any out there. Dealing with agencies is one thing, but dealing with agencies for pharmaceutical company, it's I think the worst there can be for developing content for. So for the AppV experience, the thing they wanted to promote at a certain large event with a lot of people working in healthcare was a new medicine which allowed them, to just take, I think, was believed 1 pill a day to, help the disease, to restrain its symptoms. But the problem was, if they done that focus, you got all these regulations, whatnot. So they choose something different, and that's what I think you use VR as a communication platform and not just as a novelty. So the core message was, for the application with the Parkinson's disease in particular, is to show people that with the medicine you have, or had at that time, you had to take your pills 5 times a day to get these symptoms down all over the day. That was like the normal thing for people who are having Parkinson's. So imagine 5 times a day, that's couple of hours in between, you do something like groceries, and you think you're still, on the good side of your last, pill, and then, stuff happens and you don't have them with you. So that was the whole thing of the experience, to let people, experience that weird feeling that, people were looking weird at you, and then that's because you only, you forgot to take your pill. And then afterwards, they were talking about the guys, okay, you experienced this, okay, that's not cool, right? They were talking about, okay, so imagine you had like this new medicine, and you could just take it in the morning, and you wouldn't have this whole thing going on. And that's how you use VR. You don't use it as a novelty, just, we have to use VR to get that message across. No, it's going to be part of something, and just do it because it's good in VR and not because it's VR.
I can definitely tell you from the creative side, the challenges is that, one, you definitely can't make the product the hero, make it like it's this awesome, awesome thing, like it works and it's just work, like you do this one thing and it's going to magically work. That's always the challenge. And two is like, when you developing the experiences, like when the FDA and JRC, when those guys, Joint Review Committee, when they look at these things, they sometimes take things literal, like so literal. For example, if it was a pill that you have to take, if you're doing a VR experience, you probably want to make that interaction simple, so they just actually look at the pill and select it, and then it just disappears, and that means you take it. Like when JRC and them see that, they're like, well, you can't make the pill just disappear, because then people are just going to think it evaporates. And so no, I'm serious. Like I swear to you all, like as silly as that stuff may sound, those are the type of feedback we get. And it's just like, okay, well, if we're going to depict someone taking a pill, we have to try to do that as realistic as possible, as opposed to want to make that experience condensed in the effort of time and ease and stuff. So it's like those type of considerations you have to think about, because the review guys, they don't look at user experience. They don't think of all that stuff. They don't think of the effort of, like, we want to consent this because we want to make it quick and understandable. The main message is that you take the pill at a certain time, not how you actually pick it up. It's like, but they look at all those little details, and those are the things that sometimes can get frustrating. So when you do think of experiences, whether it's AR or VR, those are the little silly things. I mean, you gotta just bring out that sheet of silly things and make sure you check it off and approach it like, well, they may look at it like this and that. So it's just, it's frustrating sometimes, but that could be the, life or death for a concept, because the client, they're afraid of the FDA and jail. They're like, oh, well, they said we can't do this, so we can't do it. It's like, no, we'll work out a solution. Just bear with us.
But the FDA aren't VR experts, so
yeah, exactly.
Trying to find those workarounds
exactly.
to explain it. Yeah, and that kind of leads to my next point. I guess since you've all had faced these obstacles when creating VR and AR, but what are other challenges that you see in creating these projects, and then how do you see that affecting the role of VR and AR in healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, I think going from the last question to this question, when you go from something that's educational, you just have to be evidence-based. So I'm probably less concerned, because that's everything that I used to do. So you just have to be evidence-based. The challenge is when you move that VR into something that's more therapeutic, and then you're making therapeutic decisions, and you're making a difference to a patient. You're asking a patient to do something, and then it becomes a medical device, and then there's a different set of regulations. And I'd say for everyone out there that's thinking in that way, so if you think of something like post-traumatic stress disorder, which Stanford are doing some stuff, other people are doing some stuff for the veterans, that's different than a showpiece for a congress. Here you're actually trying to work with someone and work with their psychology and do something and change their behavior. And I think that's where virtual reality and digital is going, because finally we have the ability to have millions of touch points with people, and we can actually change behavior. We can use cognitive behavioral therapy to help people do other things. Think about exercise, think about all these different things. But then you've got a different challenge. You've got to set up your development with a client or whatever you're doing in a different way. Same thing with gaming. Wherever you're going to make decisions, or people are going to do something or could do something different based on what they see, perceive, or experience, then you're going to have to go into a different world. However, what I would say is it's a process. That's all it is. You just need to have enough people behind the process. So you need to have the creativity to be able to make that experience great. You need to have the scientists to be able to take the learning from science and make it evidence-based and turn it into something that's both experiential but is also a medical tool. Maybe we come onto that a little bit later on, but I think that's super exciting when we can do that piece. But I wouldn't be afraid of it. There are lots of people out there that have a great understanding of how to do those sequence and documentation that you need for the FDA, EMEA. They're not experts themselves. They will ask the questions. You need the answers, and you need the documentation and backup. But it's perfectly possible. Plenty of people are heading down in that direction.
And to Mark's point, like when we work on concepts and stuff, we work internally. We have medical on hand, so we always get them in a process as early as possible. So when we, as a creative, we have our idea of how this experience is, but they keep us in check. Well, no, because that seems like you're saying this, and that's not correct and stuff. So then that kind of takes us back to the drawing board sometimes, and we have to reconfigure the way we want the experience to play out. But I guess like with anything, it is always good to get all parties, all players in at the earliest as possible, and you'll just go run it from there.
Yeah, what also helps is, if you start prototyping, I mean, what we did in advance is just make something simple, so that all the text, all the lines, all the interactions were put down in this timeline of the experience itself, and then it's much easier to show it to the other people who from the regulations point of perspective to see what's it all about before you start in our case mocapping all the expensive stuff. And then afterwards you hear, okay, you got to throw this away, that away, okay, now my whole scenery, all my narratives is all effed up, and I need to basically go back to the drawing board to fill in the gaps or even start all over again.
Yeah, and can you guys talk about any current projects you're working on in healthcare and any learnings or successes so far while in development?
Well, yeah, we got 2 really cool projects right now, and they're different than the one we did. The Parkinson's disease was more like getting empathy, and now we're doing 2 projects. One is more educational. What we're gonna make is like create this narrative about a person's life, and then about all the medicines they take in their life. And it's going to be part of some sort of museum based around pharmaceutical things. And what it will tell people who will visit that museum is to educate them about medicine, so that in the lifespan, 10% lifespan of your life, your last 10%, you're going to probably judge as like 90% of all the pills you're going to take in your life. So that's confronting. But also this table is going to be like interactive. So you can move objects towards your narrative timeline. Let's say you put an ashtray, you put it there. It's symbolic for smoking. And then you can see different stuff going on. So normally when people start about smoking, oh, you smoked, you're going to die 7 years earlier. That's probably in real life not the case, because there's going to be so much stuff going on at the end of your life, taking pills, that those 7 years don't really relate in like real life 7 years, because probably you're going to die of something else even earlier. And you get a better understanding how these kinds of things work. And essentially it's also going to be like educational for like students who are doing like a medical thing study, because they will also be to create a narrative and play with the timeline. So let's say this person lived today, they get this disease, and you see what happens. And then they can start playing, okay, the same person with the same kind of diseases, let's see what happened when they were born like 20 years earlier. And then some medicine were like really invented, and then you can see the pills like stacking up, and you see all sorts of things. So it gives a much better understanding what you're talking about and where it's all headed, and you can play with those narratives. And to elaborate on the other project, it's about healthcare, but it's a bit different. It's more for like training. This is a place where like crazy people live, and they are sheltered. And like the people who work there, they have to learn protocols for emergencies, evacuations, and whatnot. Just like in hospitals, it's really hard to train that on site. And if you talk about like that kind of training, it's more normally like getting a fire extinguisher, go to the parking lot, use it, and then we figured it out. That's how it works. And then when something happens with that place did a few years ago, protocol wasn't done right, and there was actually a problem. People died, so it's really serious. And what we're trying to do now is like scan the whole area, the whole building, and let people train, do protocol about what to do, so that if that problem happens, they already did it beforehand. And maybe even a step further, but that's probably not the thing you want to do now. Maybe show the clients who live there, maybe in a like really tuned down version, because it's probably really dramatic for them. Show them what might happen in a case of emergency when this thing is going on, this red light and this sound. And maybe that will help you evacuate them even faster, because they already know what will happen.
Awesome. I touched on a little bit about the projects that I'm working on now, and it deals with the atopic dermatitis space. And the biggest issue or problem, if you will, is that a lot of dermatologists, the way they currently treat AD is more of a surface issue, so it's just something they give you to treat on the surface, and then the patients go away, and then they come back probably like 2 weeks with a flare-up or something. So what our core message is what we're trying to educate them on, is that actually, even though you're treating the surface, the real problem is beneath the surface. It's within. So we're experimenting with using augmented reality projection mapping as a way to sort of educate derms on the pathway of AD. So essentially they'll be able to interact. And again, this is something we also want to be tangible, because again, you're dealing with the skin. That's something we all used to touch and stuff like that. So it's kind of like tying that into an augmented experience that teaches them that, hey, you guys have been looking at the skin all your practice, but actually you need to be looking below the skin. This is where all the culprits that are involved, and this is what actually causes AD and causes the cycle of flare-ups and stuff. So again, we're playing with that that kind of engagement to just kind of hammer home with these guys that, and unfortunately I can't go into too much detail. I would love to, but we just want to like drive home to these dermatologists that, hey, the issue is below, and how we presented this to the client, how we pitched this to the client was just that it was a really using augmented reality. It just made perfect sense, because again, we're dealing with the skin, we're dealing with something that derms are used to seeing every day. So how can we use that as a vehicle to come in on to teach them this complicated pathway? Because this is also another thing, and I'm sure you guys probably know as well, is just you'd be surprised. I mean, we all think doctors are smart, like, oh, they go to school and they book smart and the stuff they go, but you'd be surprised at how much they don't actually know, and it's kind of scary. But our job is our job. And I'm probably gonna get some feedback on that comment, but our job is
They don't have time to read. That's what it is.
I guess our job is to basically take the complicated science of that stuff and then distill it down in a way where it's easy for them to understand. And with that understanding, they're able to strengthen the empathy with the patients they serve, so they're no longer just a number, like, so-and-so's here today, you give them something to get out of my office. Like, no, they'll actually kind of understand them better and what the process that they go through. And then also that in turn helps us, sell our product, because we address those issues directly at the core, which you just learned and which you took away and understand. Now see how our product works and attacks that. So those are is interesting, and just trying to talk to doctors, and you would think the smartest people in the world, but sometimes you kind of have to spoon feed them stuff.
I got a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find a solution. So I can't say I'm exactly working on it now, but I have a problem. And I'm looking for people to try and solve it for me in respiratory disease. So people out there, this is life stuff. So speak to me afterwards. Next July, there's going to be let's call it a smash up between an idea generation session and a hackathon in Chicago for COPD Foundation. And what we're trying to look at there is virtual pulmonary rehabilitation, but actually goes a little bit further. And pulmonary rehabilitation means after you've come out of hospital, you need to get your chest wall moving. So there's often a range of limited motions that you need to do, but they need to be controlled. And there's good economics in it, because respiratory therapists can only manage a certain number of patients, but the patients have to get up really early to go see a respiratory therapist. These people can't move very quickly, and it takes a lot of effort, and they get really tired. So being able to do that at home, asynchronous, is a really great idea. So I'm looking for solutions where we can track range of motion, motivate people to do a little bit of exercise that's guided, be able to track what the change is, and to do that over a course of time to deliver kind of at-home rehabilitation. Now that goes from pulmonary rehabilitation, but it's the same after a heart attack. You need to do cardiac rehabilitation. It's the same after surgery, after a hip replacement, after knee surgery, after many things where you don't want to actually have to take the patient back to the hospital. You want to be able to do it at home. And you need an engaging way to do it, because we know if you tell you to go do some of the simple things like take your antibiotics for 7 days, you're not going to do it. In fact, everything that we medically tell you to do, you're not going to do. So, so getting people to try and push those boundaries and to bring some gaming into it, to bring some outside in into it, and to think of different ways of doing it. I think that's interesting. COPD is probably the third leading cause of death, or it will be in the next couple of years, and it's one of the biggest issues for emergency rooms in the US and around the world. So anything that can keep patients out and keep them more active, and I think everything that generally is about motivationally based activity. If we could do two things to the world, make you do more exercise and make you eat better, then we would do as much good as all the pharmacology, I think, that's been placed in the world so far.
Yeah. And aside, Leonard Nimoy actually died of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Last question before we open it up to audience Q&A. Oops, sorry. Really quickly, what advice do you have for developers who are either, wanting to acquire clients in healthcare or at least do it on their own, really quickly, and then we'll open it to audience Q&A.
Yeah, like I mentioned beforehand, first show them the technology. Don't talk about the subject, just let them see what it's all about, because a lot of clients of ours, they always say, oh yeah, I tried VR, and then they end up talking, they just had some cardboard thing on for like 20 seconds, and it was like showing a monoscopic movie which juddered like hell, and they thought that was cool. And once you've done that, just establish the core message, because they probably have ideas of their own, but storytelling and a lot of other things in VR, it's not laid out yet. The last thing you want is some agency telling you how to do it while you already know it's not going to work out. And get that core message out there, and then maybe do something completely different, but get much better results.
Definitely, and I can speak to them about the agency. Not everyone at the agency knows everything about VR. It's not like we're the experts in VR and AR, and 9 times out of 10, it's always a partnership with the agency and then a third-party vendor in developing experiences and stuff. And one of the things we look for in looking for a potential partner is obviously the experience and some of the things you do. And definitely working in the healthcare space would be a very big plus, because that would show to us that you do understand the regulations and the processes you have to go through in creating an experience. And it won't be so much as us, the agency, always have to, we can't do this, we can't do that, and it's like, it's just taking too long now because we kind of have to hold your hands through this whole process and stuff. So it definitely helps with some experience, that pretty much, and I'm only speaking for myself, but that's pretty much it. Just the experience in doing it, working with the technology, and it's always a plus to have work in the healthcare. Not always a necessity, but it definitely helps and eases some of the sting in working in the healthcare space a lot, because it can be a laborious process and frustrating because of sometimes what seems like a silly little regulation, but. And that's the best advice I can tell.
Yeah, or just come into it knowing the pain points, which is why we're having this panel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would say have a point of view. So don't be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
So you're probably great at something, whether it's a piece of technology or using that technology in a certain way. Have a point of view and then learn which patient groups that best serves. So whether it's range of motion or it's a visualization, that's more cognition. So have a point of view and then take that point of view to patient organizations and test that, not with the pharma company, test it with the patient organization. They're accessible, they're public, they would love you, they'll do it for free because they want your stuff, and then that's going to be a great sell back to someone else that may have to kind of go find it.
And that's actually a very great point, because what we normally do in that process when we work with clients, like initially, obviously the agency goes to the clients and we make the pitch to them. Then we bring on the vendor. It's never really that first initial pitch where it's the agency and the vendor coming to talk to the client. Like you guys kind of come in after the process. But to his point, going and doing these tests on your own and stuff, that would be such an awesome sell to the client and give them confidence and having us work with a vendor who's already done stuff like this. And I mean, to be honest, that would be like the easiest of sell. It's like, hey, these guys this is what they do on their own. So it's like, all right, great, let's go.
Yeah,
Give
a
us
lot
an
of people are
estimate and
doing
we're good
it
to
on
go.
their own. Yeah, a lot of people are already doing it on their own, a lot of college students. So we'll open it up to audience Q&A. There's a microphone in the middle. Don't be shy. We have like 8 minutes, so.
Rapid fire.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Kind of, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Great panel, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Matt from OSOVR. We're building interactive surgical training for orthopedics. So I've heard you talk quite a bit about education, patient education, but not so much about kind of training medical professionals. And I'm just curious if you guys have seen cool stuff there, what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a massive space as well. I mean, we didn't cover everything that you can cover in this session. Surgical training, huge need. Being able to visualize what's inside the body without all the blood and bits and gore, give people that muscle memory as they try and go into operations that are technical, complicated, and give them that confidence. There's a big piece for patients, but also for physicians around trust. I think working as what I'm working on now, which is how do you get people to trust what they're doing in VR is going to translate into the real world. So there's work to be done there. But certainly, there's, the first virtual reality surgical procedures, training the next generation to be able to do what, the skilled surgeons of this generation can do. Visualization, I think, is the other thing that we didn't talk about, visualizing big data, but visualizing complex surgery, on all those pieces, 3D printing of kidneys to look at the workflow for an operation, how to best model it, and then to practice. That can cut down on surgery for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and that survival rates then come much higher. So I think if you really want to look at those things, which is where you're heading, which I think is great, the value proposition for those becomes much easier than the educational pieces, because you can see the saving time, and everything else that goes into it. So there's some good stuff out there, but it needs a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm giving a talk tomorrow on hand interactions for training at 2:30, so some people in here might find that interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'll be going.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, thanks so much for this panel. It's really interesting. I come at it from the user experience side, the design side, and my question for you is, what techniques do you use to engage the healthcare providers and other business side stakeholders in the creative process prior to developing the actual thing?
Well, I can definitely tell you from this recent project is a very thorough storyboard, intuitive storyboard, basically mapping out the experience and then showing how, like for example, we're showing the atopic dermatitis pathway, so showing how AD and the TH2 cells, how they interact with the skin and stuff. So it was basically taking that pathway that the client is already familiar with and then breaking that down in our experience storyboard. Because again, and I mean, no offense to the client, but you have to kind of treat them like a child in terms of this technology and how it works and how it translates and why it makes sense. And you do that through simple storyboards, simple pretty pictures that clearly illustrate with diagrams. Okay, user comes up to here, user does this, and this would translate. And one of the things I found that's pretty successful is usually when if I'm creating an experience that sort of uses an already like established diagram or some pathway that they're familiar with, I kind of take the storyboard and then have a one-to-one. This is what the experience is, and this is what the user would actually be seeing in detail, so you can actually see how it translates. So it helps them to understand, because they can't, for the life of me, they can never picture it in their head. So whatever you can do to illustrate that, sometimes it may require 2-3 days to put together a nice and simple storyboard, as detailed as you can, but not too heavy-handed where you lose them. But anything you can do in that aspect to help sell them on the idea, because you really have to draw it out for them in order to understand. Because again, they're looking at this stuff for the first time, where we're immersed in it all day, so it comes secondhand to us. But for them, it just like sometimes it's overload when you try to explain it to them. So you just break it down in a simple process. And of course, the simpler you make the storyboard in terms of like the less frames, you show that also helps translate to them that the experience isn't a long-winded one. Like they got to do a whole bunch of things, and because that's the one thing they also say, well, it looks too long and complicated. Like how long, So if you can try to capture that as well in your boards, that would be cool. Animatics would always be awesome if you can do that, like a rough animatic. But yeah.
Yeah, but also what we did was make sure they have the hardware themselves. If they don't, willing to buy something or whatever, okay, we'll have special equipment for that, because just let them show what the actual thing is. It's much better than initially you want to do storyboarding, but at some point if you're going to prototype and just show it to them, it's really helping, because a lot of people you're not going to talk during your conversations are going to try it out. So even if you want to do some other stuff in the future for them, like with us, with AppV, it was because of some internally process. We had this VR setup already there from us, that another division for Parkinson's reached out to us. So that also helps yourself in the future. So it's really interesting to just send the equipment there if they're not willing to do it themselves, because it's new, it's techy. If you set it up, give it some sort of surface, it will definitely ease the whole process of revising or looking at the whole thing you're making.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we have a minute left, but let's
Rapid fire.
Two quick questions. One is, what is the kind of go-to hardware that you typically use for your different interactions with AR or VR? And then what would you want to see kind of in 2 years or 3 years down the road for different types of interaction or input?
Well, for us, it depends on the case. If it's for like a convention or something, a congress, typically we do a lot of with CV1 nowadays, because it's way easier, setting it up, and it's for them it's easier. And if it's just like a narrative, like a storytelling thing, it works fine. Of course, if you want to do something with motion input, now it's probably just the HTC Vive for us. But we've also been experimenting with Manus VR, the gloves. Especially if you're going to do stuff like training, you probably want to have something like that instead of holding controllers. So basically that are your options. But depending on the whole goal, the whole message, you can tell if it's going to be a hassle to incorporate like motion controllers, or if they're just doing it for the the novelty factor of having things move about, while for the whole thing itself. It doesn't make any sense.
The one thing I would definitely love to see in the future would be more AR and VR multi-user experiences, especially because we do a lot of stuff at congresses, conventions like this, and the clients always want, they like the technology, but they would always kind of the hesitation is like, well, only one person could experience it and to capture people at a conference is always tough, because they've seen millions of booths and stuff, so you got that one window to capture people. You want to try to capture as many as you can and let them experience something as much as they can. So
thank you.
Yeah, also to just add something, what also is interesting, we talked to another therapeutic company. We're trying to talk to juveniles, and they had these problems. These kids aren't opening up during the sessions they're supposed to, while using social media to each other. They just flap out everything. The therapeutic person wants to know, and creating like this multi-user experience, which works together with a special sensor that captures your brain activity, lets people, get in this one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, but it's maybe more abstracted, like the things you see from, Oculus Rift. Their avatars, they're more like abstract. But then maybe you could put some stuff in the environment, depending on the sensors you use, to see a glance of the extra sensors. So you have this lava lamp, and if there's a lot of activity, it's turning red. So you're asking the right questions, or you're going in the right directions. Of course, maybe due to regulations, these ideas might not all be, feasible. But it's interesting to see where you can go, and if that technology progresses. Sometimes it's really interesting to get something extra in there, technology-wise.
Last one, and then
Thank you. So feel like a little bit of an intruder. I'm one of those doctors who doesn't really know too much, who's in the conference here. But I have a question for you, and also for the folks in the audience who said you're developing for healthcare. Because I'm at Memorial Sloan Kettering. We're one of the leading cancer centers in the country. We try to cure cancer in new ways. We push the forefront in biomedical technology. I'm the only crazy person who works there who thinks that this isn't, that VR isn't just a video game, and that we can do some interesting things with our patients.
Thank you.
We have patients with chronic pain who could be really use some distraction. We have patients, who are young people who are getting chemotherapy, and it's not a very good experience. We have people at the end of life who might want to be in a different situation. We have isolated patients with no immune system who are physically isolated from their friends and their family, and I'd like to connect them. This is kind of a forefront technology here, right? I built my own PC. I dragged in my kit. I've shown my chairman of surgery and my chairman of medicine. I've shown them, and they've been like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And enough that they sent me here. But the problem is, until we are really there, I'm not exactly sure how to engage with developers to do the small version of this stuff. How do I get somebody like you guys to build something with me to try out with just 100 patients, so that we can demonstrate that this is something that's useful before. I'm not a pharma company. I'm not buying advertising here. I want to do some science and see if this can improve patient care and improve patient experience. And I don't exactly know how to engage with you guys, so any advice for that?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk after this. I'm getting the look to get off the stage, but thank you guys so much for attending. We can meet with you, anyone who wants more questions afterwards. Thank you very much.